Welcome, everyone. A very warm, very enthusiastic welcome to you, the listener, to the YouTube channel named URSummary.
Yeah.
We are so incredibly thrilled to have you joining us today. Usually when we talk about a medical diagnosis, there is this expectation of, precision.
Right, like it's a math problem.
Exactly. It's like engineering.
Mm.
If you fall and break your arm, you go to the hospital, they put you in front of a machine, and the X-ray shows that jagged white line on the dark film. And the doctor just points a pen at it and says, there it is. There's the break.
Yeah, it's entirely binary. It is undeniably broken, or it is not broken. And I mean, as a society, we find an immense amount of comfort in that.
Oh, absolutely.
We desperately want our pain to be visible, to be quantifiable, and most importantly, to be neatly categorized.
Right, because if we can see it, we can put a cast on it. But then, you step into the world of neurodevelopment, you step into the world of adolescent psychology, and especially the world of trauma.
Oh, yeah, that changes everything.
It really does. Suddenly, that X-ray machine is completely useless. You are looking at a diagnostic landscape that is, quite honestly, terrifyingly murky. You can't just point to a jagged white line on a brain scan and say, there's the sadness, there's the isolation.
It is the absolute definition of diagnostic muddy waters. And the danger of those muddy waters is that when pain isn't visible, society often demands that we just pretend it doesn't exist at all.
And that murky, complex, profoundly human territory is exactly where we are going today. Our mission for this deep dive is to explore the profound difference between simply observing life from a safe distance and actually terrifyingly participating in it.
Which is such a massive leap for a lot of people.
It is, and our map for this journey is Stephen Chbosky's modern classic, The Perks of Being a Wallflower. We are going to navigate this landscape through the incredibly intimate, often heartbreaking, and ultimately triumphant letters of a 15-year-old boy named Charlie.
What's fascinating here is the format itself, which is crucial to how we, as the audience, actually receive the information. The source material is entirely epistolary.
Right, meaning it's told through letters.
Exactly. For those unfamiliar with the term, the narrative is constructed out of a series of letters. Specifically, these are anonymous letters written by Charlie over the course of his freshman year of high school, spanning from August 1991 to August 1992. And he addresses them simply to, "Dear friend."
I want to stop right there, because his reasoning for writing these letters is so telling. He says he's writing to this specific, unnamed person because he heard they listen and understand.
Yeah, and there's that other really specific detail he mentions.
Yes. Crucially, he heard they didn't try to sleep with someone at a party even when they could have. That is his baseline criteria for a safe harbor. Not that this person is fun or popular, but that this person possesses, basic human decency and restraint.
It sets a rather tragic baseline for what Charlie expects from the world. I mean, the bar is on the floor. But by formatting the narrative this way, Chbosky does something brilliant from a psychological perspective. He immediately places you, the listener, the reader, in a position of ultimate trust.
You become the friend.
You do. You become that confidant. You are acting as the silent receiver for a narrator who is brilliantly observant, highly sensitive, and, as we come to learn, deeply traumatized.
Because he's just writing down everything as it happens.
Right. Charlie is processing the world in real time without the benefit of hindsight, and you are the only one he trusts with the raw, unfiltered feed of his consciousness.
It feels like an immense privilege to be let into someone's head like that. So before we really get into the weeds here, I want you to think back to your own high school days for a second. Picture the gym, the cafeteria, the terrible fluorescent lighting, the deafening noise of those hallways.
Oh man, the noise.
Right. Where did you fit into that ecosystem? Were you the one out there sweating on the dance floor, leading the conversation, taking up space? Or were you the one pressed against the wall, fading into the background, just taking it all in? Because that duality is the beating heart of this entire deep dive.
It's the central tension of his life.
Okay, so let's unpack this term. What does it actually mean to be a wallflower?
Well, in a strictly botanical sense, a wallflower is a hardy little plant that grows in the cracks of stonework or against walls, often in places where, nothing else can thrive.
It survives on the edges.
Exactly. But in our social lexicon, it refers to someone who remains on the sidelines of social activities. Historically, it was used to describe people, usually young women, sitting against the wall at a dance because they hadn't been asked to participate.
It definitely implies shyness or unpopularity or just a lack of social grace.
Yeah, but in the context of our source material, Charlie's definition gets a massive, almost philosophical upgrade.
It really does, and it happens during a scene that is both incredibly funny, and deeply formative. It's Charlie's very first real high school party. He's been hanging out with his new older friends, step-siblings Patrick and Sam.
And they end up at Bob's house.
Right, Bob's house.
Mm-hmm.
Bob is, as the text implies, heavily intoxicated. And Charlie, who is a very sheltered, very naive 15-year-old, is offered a brownie. He eats it, and surprised it is heavily laced with marijuana.
Which leads to this incredibly endearing yet deeply disorienting sequence. I mean, Charlie isn't used to any kind of substance altering his perception.
Not at all.
He starts describing the sensory overload, seeing the room slip away, the music sounding heavy like water.
Yeah.
His internal governor completely shuts down, and he famously, very earnestly, asks the room for a milkshake.
I love that detail so much. The whole room laughs at him, but crucially, they don't laugh meanly. It's an affectionate laugh.
Yeah, they find him charming.
Exactly. Sam actually takes him to the kitchen to make him that milkshake. And while he's waiting, wandering around this house in an altered state, Charlie accidentally stumbles into a coat room, and he catches Patrick kissing Brad.
Which is a massive deal.
Huge, because Brad is the star quarterback of the football team. He's a guy who is supposed to be straight, popular, entirely untouchable in the high school hierarchy. And Patrick swears Charlie to secrecy.
And look at Charlie's reaction here. Typical high school freshmen might panic or leverage that information for social currency or, express disgust based on the prevailing prejudices of 1991.
Right. He could have ruined Brad's life.
But Charlie just nods and agrees. He doesn't judge. He doesn't ask invasive questions. He simply accepts the reality of what he has seen and files it away to protect them.
That non-judgmental acceptance changes his entire trajectory. Because when they go back downstairs, the dynamic has shifted. Patrick is looking at Charlie differently. He points at him and says to Bob, "He's something, isn't he?"
A total shift in respect.
And then Patrick delivers the defining quote of the text. He says, "He's a wallflower." And when Charlie understandably gets a little nervous about that label, Patrick sits next to him and explains exactly what he means. He says, "You see things, you keep quiet about them, and you understand." Bob then raises his drink and the whole room toasts to Charlie.
It is a profound moment of initiation. For the first time in his high school career, perhaps in his whole life, Charlie is seen, validated, and celebrated, not in spite of his quietness, but because of it.
It is a beautiful moment, but I have to push back here. I really want to challenge this idea.
Oh, how so?
Is being a wallflower actually a superpower? Because his friends frame it as this massive compliment. They view it as a recognition of his deep, soulful empathy. But to me, looking at the totality of his behavior, it seems like a symptom of a much darker isolation.
That's a very fair point.
Like, if you're constantly just watching other people live, are you really living at all?
That is exactly the tension we need to explore. You've hit on the core duality of Charlie's character. On one hand, yes, his ability to observe without inserting his ego makes him incredibly empathetic.
Because he's not making it about himself.
Right. He sees the pain and the nuances in others that everyone else ignores because they are too busy performing. But on the other hand, you were absolutely right to be skeptical. This hypervigilance, this constant scanning of the environment is a classic trauma response.
Wow, really?
Yeah, he is watching life almost like a movie. He is entirely disconnected from his own agency. He believes his only value is in witnessing others.
I kept thinking of an analogy while reviewing the source material. It's like Charlie is the designated driver for everyone else's emotions.
Oh, I like that. Walk me through it.
Think about the designated driver at a wild party. You are there, physically present in the ring. You are making sure everyone gets home safe. You are holding your friend's hair back in the bathroom. You are diffusing fights.
Just managing the chaos.
Exactly. You are hyper aware of where the exits are and who has had too much to drink. But you are not actually experiencing the party yourself. You're completely sober to the joy, the abandon, the music around you, because you are entirely focused on managing the environment. You exist to facilitate other people's experiences at the total expense of your own.
That is a phenomenal analogy. And the tragedy of Charlie's situation is that he is managing the external emotional environment because his internal environment feels way too dangerous to inhabit.
To the distraction.
Total distraction. If he focuses entirely on Sam's relationship drama or Patrick's secret life, he doesn't have to look at the massive, gaping void of his own trauma. And there's a specific, brilliant detail from the source material that perfectly illustrates this dynamic of enduring internal pain just to find a scrap of external belonging.
Oh, you're talking about the science class.
Yes. Charlie mentions a science class experiment taught by his teacher, Mr. Z.
The rat experiment. Okay, let's unpack this because it is so wild. Charlie writes about this experiment where scientists put a rat or a mouse in a cage. On one side of the cage, there is food, but to get to the food, the rat has to walk across a floor that the scientists have electrified.
Which is horrifying.
It is, so the rat gets shocked. Now, the rat will endure a certain amount of voltage to get to the food, because it needs to survive. But eventually, if they turn the voltage up too high, the pain is too much. The rat stops going for the food and just starves.
Right, survival instinct kicks in, but pain overrides hunger.
But, and this is the crazy part, when the scientists replace the food with something that gives the rat intense pleasure, like stimulating a specific part of the brain, the rat will put up with significantly more voltage. It will endure agonizing shocks, way more than it did from your survival nourishment, just to get that intense hit of pleasure.
It is a brutal experiment, but if we extract the psychology from it, this isn't just a quirky anecdote Charlie throws in. This is a profound metaphor for the human adolescent condition, and specifically for what Charlie and his friends are doing every single day.
Because high school is the electrified floor.
Precisely. High school, and by extension society at large, is full of shocks. Bullying, alienation, terrible relationships, physical fights, the humiliation of the cafeteria hierarchy is a highly charged, painful environment.
So true.
But teenagers will endure an incredible amount of psychological and emotional voltage for just a brief moment of intense pleasure. And what is that pleasure for a teenager? It isn't just a chemical dopamine hit. It's belonging. It's acceptance. It's the feeling of being toasted at a party by older kids who think you're special.
Wow. So they are willingly walking across the electric floor of high school politics, taking psychological damage every single day, just to be seen, just to not be alone.
Yes. And that desperate desire to be seen, to be loved, brings us to the most crucial psychological framework of the entire text. It is the thesis statement that dictates exactly why these characters endure the specific shocks they do.
Here's where it gets really interesting.
Yeah.
Early on in the narrative, Charlie is talking to his advanced English teacher, Bill. Now, Charlie has been observing all these incredibly messed up, toxic relationships around him. He sees people he cares about being treated like garbage.
He's the wallflower, taking it all in.
Right. And he asks Bill, point blank, why do people choose people who treat them terribly? And Bill drops this absolute bomb of a sentence. He says, Charlie, we accept the love we think we deserve.
We accept the love we think we deserve. It is a stunning piece of insight. It serves as the central nervous system of this deep dive, because this single sentence isn't just a platitude. It maps onto almost every single character we encounter in Charlie's world.
It really does.
It explains the mechanical gears of their suffering. It explains the voltage they're willing to endure.
Let's look at how this actually plays out in the source material, starting with Charlie's older sister. We have to talk about her because her situation is so incredibly jarring. On paper, she's the archetype of a successful teenager.
She has it all together.
Exactly. She's a senior, she's in honors classes, she's physically attractive, she's confident, she actively argues with boys about women's rights and environmentalism, she takes up space. But she dates this guy who initially seems sweet but pathetic. He makes her these elaborate mixtapes with hand-colored covers.
He is consistently referred to as the mixtape guy. He seems entirely submissive to her dominant personality.
Right. Until one night, they are hanging out in Charlie's basement. Charlie is in the room, just watching television, being the invisible observer as usual. The sister, the boyfriend start arguing, and the sister is absolutely laying into this boy.
She's brutal.
She is verbally emasculating him, mocking him for not standing up to a bully when he was younger, just verbally tearing him to shreds. And the boy snaps. He winds up and hits her hard across the face, right in front of Charlie.
It is a shocking escalation of violence. And as an observer, you expect the confident, assertive honors student who argues for women's rights to immediately kick him out of the house. You expect her to end it right there.
But she doesn't. And that is the part that completely breaks your brain. Charlie notes that immediately after being struck, she just gets soft and nice. She actually tells Charlie to leave the room.
She protects the abuser.
She covers up the abuse. She makes Charlie promise not to tell their parents or their older brother. And the truly devastating part is, later that exact same weekend, Charlie catches them sleeping together. She stays with him. She anchors herself to the person who assaulted her.
To understand this, we have to look past her public persona and examine her private self-worth. Outwardly, she projects high self-esteem. She gets straight A's. She commands a room. But inwardly, Her metric for the love she genuinely believes she deserves is incredibly low. There's a massive cognitive dissonance.
But why? Why would someone so smart accept that?
Because of how she views herself in relation to her own cruelty. When she was verbally berating him, she was acting out of a toxic need for control. When he reacted with physical violence, a damaged part of her psyche didn't view it as a deal breaker.
It viewed it as, what, justified?
Subconsciously, she may have viewed it as a twisted validation of his masculinity, like he finally stood up to her, or, more tragically, as a punishment she felt she had earned for being cruel. When Bill says, "We accept the love we think we deserve," he means that our baseline of self-respect dictates the boundary of what we will tolerate.
That makes a terrifying kind of sense.
She accepts the violence because fundamentally, beneath the straight A's and the feminist rhetoric, she doesn't believe she warrants a love that is both passionate and completely safe. She believes love requires a toll of suffering.
Which flows perfectly into looking at Sam. Sam is the girl Charlie is hopelessly, utterly in love with. She is vibrant, she has incredible taste in music, she is fiercely protective of her friends, and she is endlessly kind to Charlie.
But her romantic life is a disaster.
A total disaster. She is dating this older college guy named Craig. And Craig is terrible. He is constantly blatantly cheating on her. Multiple times with multiple different girls.
And this infidelity isn't a closely guarded secret. It is apparent to almost everyone in their social circle except Sam. Or rather, Sam chooses not to see it.
She's in denial.
And the tragic part is, even when the red flags are waving directly in her face, she ignores them. We have to ask why someone so intelligent and vibrant would blind herself to such blatant disrespect.
And the answer to that is rooted in a deeply traumatic past. Charlie notes early on that Sam had a reputation when she was younger, implying she was sexually active very early. But the source material gets much darker.
It really does.
Sam eventually confesses a horrific truth to Charlie. Her first kiss wasn't some innocent middle school crush. Her first kiss was with one of her father's adult friends when she was only 7 years old.
The gravity of that detail cannot be overstated. When we talk about the love we think we deserve, we are talking about the blueprints we are handed in childhood. Her foundational blueprint for physical intimacy and affection was corrupted before her brain had the capacity to even understand what intimacy was.
I want to make sure I understand the mechanics of this. How does an event at age 7 translate into letting a college guy cheat on you at age 17?
Well, when a child is sexually abused or inappropriate boundaries are crossed by an adult they trust, the child's mind cannot process the betrayal. To survive the cognitive dissonance, the child often internalizes the blame.
They think it's their fault.
Exactly. They feel fundamentally dirty or ruined or unworthy of pure, uncomplicated affection. The trauma rewires their baseline. So, flash forward 10 years. Sam settles for Craig. Craig's cheating, his emotional distance, is just background noise to her because in her damaged internal logic, a guy like Craig, handsome, older, socially validated, is the absolute ceiling of what a ruined girl deserves.
Oh man, that is so heartbreaking.
A deeply buried part of her believes that because of her past, because of that reputation, she does not deserve a partner who is completely faithful, deeply present, and respectful. She settles for the aesthetic of a good boyfriend rather than the reality of one.
She accepts the love she thinks she deserves. It is just gut-wrenching when you put it that way. And then we have to talk about Patrick and Brad. This dynamic is perhaps one of the most heartbreaking sequences in the entire narrative.
It's agonizing to watch.
Patrick is this larger-than-life character. He is so funny, so unapologetically himself in so many ways. And he is secretly hooking up with Brad, the aforementioned star quarterback. But Brad is absolutely terrified of being outed. It is 1991. The social stigma is immense. So Brad sets these incredibly rigid, toxic parameters. He will only hook up with Patrick when he's drunk or high.
Or, more accurately, when he can pretend to be drunk or high. It is a calculated strategy to maintain plausible deniability.
Oh, right, because then he has an excuse.
By heavily associating their intimacy with substance use, Brad creates an escape hatch. He can wake up the next day, walk past Patrick in the school hallway without making eye contact, and if ever confronted, he can say, "Man, I was so wasted. I don't remember a thing that happened last night."
Exactly. And Patrick puts up with this. He endures being a ghost in Brad's life for months.
Yeah.
And it all culminates in this tragic scene at a party at Patrick's house. Brad shows up, they slip away into Patrick's bedroom, and Brad just breaks down.
Just completely loses it.
He starts crying hysterically. But he isn't crying about his sexuality or about Patrick. He's crying about his father, his overbearing, demanding father. And what does Patrick do?
He protects him.
Right. To protect Brad from being discovered crying in a gay classmate's bedroom by the rest of the party, Patrick physically pulls up Brad's pants. He tells him to lay down and just pretend he's passed out from drinking too much. Patrick then walks out of his own bedroom, rubs his eyes to pretend they are red from smoking weed rather than from crying, and covers for the guy who actively refuses to acknowledge his existence in the daylight.
And what is the ultimate consequence of Patrick's sacrifice?
It leads to Brad's father catching wind of Brad being passed out drunk, and his dad ships him off to rehab. Patrick loses him anyway.
Patrick endures immense emotional voltage here. He accepts being a dirty secret. He accepts being ignored in public. He accepts the role of comforting the very boy who denies him.
Why, though? Why does Patrick settle for that?
Partly because he genuinely loves Brad, but largely because, as a gay teenager in the early 90s, the overwhelming societal messaging tells Patrick he is a deviant. The culture has told him his love is shameful. Therefore, he accepts a love that forces him into the shadows, into locked bedrooms and drunken excuses, because society has convinced him that is exactly where his love belongs. It is a macroscopic societal application of Bill's thesis.
It really makes you step back and look at the architecture of your own life. And I want to pause here and ask you, the listener, to really think about this for a second. Where in your own life might you be settling?
It's a tough question to ask yourself.
It is. Are you putting up with a boss who constantly belittles your contributions because you secretly fear you aren't smart enough to get hired elsewhere? Are you maintaining a friendship with someone who completely drains your energy because you think you're too difficult to make new friends? Or are you with a partner who treats you like a convenient option instead of a priority?
Bill's wisdom isn't just a clever line in a book about teenagers. It is the fundamental operating system of human adult relationships. If you don't like the love you are receiving, you have to examine the love you believe you deserve.
That is the pivotal realization. And it raises a massive practical question. If our self-worth dictates the love and the treatment we accept, how do we actively go about raising our self-worth? How do we reprogram the baseline?
For Charlie, who is entirely lost in his trauma, the answer comes through education. But not just rote academic memorization, it is a profound emotional education, curated meticulously by Bill.
I love Bill so much. Every single person on earth needs a teacher like Bill in their corner. He is so much more than an advanced English teacher grading papers. He acts as a true mentor.
He really steps into that void for Charlie.
He recognizes that Charlie is drowning, and he throws him a lifeline disguised as a customized syllabus for growing up. He starts handing Charlie these massive, complex books outside of the regular class curriculum. He gives him To Kill a Mockingbird, Peter Pan, The Great Gatsby, The Catcher in the Rye, On the Road, Naked Lunch, The Fountainhead.
It's quite the reading list.
It is like Bill is a pharmacist, prescribing specific pieces of literature as medicine for Charlie's specific psychological ailments.
That is exactly what he is doing. Bill recognizes that Charlie is intellectually brilliant, but emotionally unanchored. When Charlie writes essays about these extra books, he isn't just analyzing plot structure or identifying themes.
He's internalizing them.
He is doing the hard work of mapping these fictional narratives onto his own messy reality. Bill is teaching Charlie how to locate himself within the broader, universal human experience. He is showing Charlie that he is not the first person to feel isolated or traumatized or misunderstood.
And there's one specific interaction about these books that I think is the most important lesson Bill imparts. When Bill hands Charlie Ayn Rand's novel, The Fountainhead, he gives him a very specific warning. He tells Charlie, be a filter, not a sponge.
Be a filter, not a sponge. If you take nothing else away from this deep dive, take that phrase. It is a brilliant piece of pedagogy, especially when dealing with a traumatized mind.
Oh, so?
Think about the mechanics of a sponge. A sponge is entirely passive. It blindly absorbs everything it is submerged in. If you put it in clean water, it absorbs clean water. If you drop it in a puddle of toxic chemicals, it absorbs the toxic chemicals. It has no defense mechanism.
Right, it just takes whatever's there.
A filter, on the other hand, is active. A filter processes the material passing through it, extracts what is useful, nourishing, or necessary, and actively discards the impurities and the waste.
Right, because Bill knows exactly what The Fountainhead is. It is a philosophically dense, highly controversial book that promotes objectivism, which, to quickly define it for our listeners, is Ayn Rand's philosophy emphasizing extreme, uncompromising individualism and rational self-interest.
It basically argues that selfishness is a virtue and living for others is a weakness.
Exactly. And Bill doesn't want Charlie to read this and suddenly become a callous, arrogant objectivist who doesn't care about anyone else.
Precisely. Bill knows Charlie's default state is to be a sponge for everyone else's trauma. He absorbs Sam's pain, Patrick's pain, his sister's pain. Bill gives him a book about radical selfishness, not to make him selfish, but to introduce the concept of self-preservation to a boy who has none.
That's genius.
He wants Charlie to filter Rand's extreme philosophy and extract the small kernel of truth he desperately needs, that he has a right to exist for himself.
And it works. Charlie reads the book. He reads about the main character, this uncompromising architect named Howard Rourke. And Rourke tells his friend something to the effect of, "I would die for you, but I won't live for you."
It's a powerful statement.
And Charlie, actively acting as a filter for the first time, translates that intense philosophical statement into his own teenage emotional language. He looks at his friendships with Sam and Patrick. He realizes he would do anything for them. He would die for them. But he has literally been living for them.
He's just been a satellite in their orbit.
Yes, he has been their emotional sponge, existing only in their orbit. He extracts a vital lesson he has to learn to live his own life. He cannot solely exist as a supporting character in someone else's movie.
It is a crucial, monumental step toward participation. But literature, as powerful as it is, isn't the only curriculum Charlie is studying. The other major pillar of his coming-of-age syllabus, the other medium through which he learns to process the world, is music.
Oh, the soundtrack of adolescence. The source material is absolutely saturated with music. It isn't just background noise. It is the currency of their friendships.
It's how they communicate.
We already mentioned the Autumn Leaves mixtape that the abusive boyfriend makes for the sister. You have the Smiths' haunting song Asleep, which becomes this recurring, almost dangerous anthem for Charlie. There is an entire sacred ritual dedicated to gifting music.
Oh, the mixtape rich.
Spending hours sitting by a dual cassette deck, curating a mixtape, agonizing over the track list, ensuring the transition from track 4 to track 5 is emotionally resonant. It is how these kids communicate when their own vocabulary fails them.
Because adolescence is a developmental period where your emotional capacity vastly outpaces your linguistic capacity. You are feeling things with an intensity you have never experienced before: rage, profound sorrow, ecstatic joy, but you do not yet have the words to articulate those feelings accurately.
So a song does it for you.
A carefully selected song acts as a proxy for your soul. When Charlie gives Sam that Beatles record, specifically the song Something, he isn't just saying, "I like this melody." He is essentially handing her his heart and saying, "This is what it feels like to look at you."
And this deep connection to music leads to what is undeniably the most iconic, transcendent moment in the entire narrative. They are driving through a tunnel in Pittsburgh. Sam is driving her pickup truck. Patrick is in the passenger seat, aggressively fighting with the radio dial, battling through static and commercials, searching for the perfect frequency.
Setting the scene perfectly.
And Charlie is just sitting in the middle, between them. Finally, Patrick hits his station playing this perfect soaring song, and suddenly the atmosphere shifts. Sam is tapping the steering wheel, completely lost in the rhythm. Patrick rolls down the window and sticks his hand out, making airwaves against the wind. And Charlie looks at them, looks at the lights passing overhead and says, "I feel infinite."
I feel infinite. It is a phrase that has resonated with millions of people, far beyond the confines of the source material. It captures a universal yearning.
So help me unpack the mechanics of this. From a psychological and neurological standpoint, why do teenagers feel infinite? What is actually happening in that specific moment in the tunnel?
What you are seeing is a fleeting, absolute alignment of psychological needs. Let's break it down into 3 parts. First, there is the experience of unconditional belonging. Look at Charlie's physical position. He is situated directly between the 2 people he loves most in the world. He is literally, physically centered in his community. He is safe.
Okay, that makes sense.
Second, there is a state of radical present-mindedness. Trauma, by its very definition, constantly pulls you backward into the past, into flashbacks, regrets, and repressed memories. Anxiety, conversely, constantly pulls you forward into the future, into dread and anticipation.
But in the tunnel,
But in that tunnel, the sensory overload of the loud music, the rushing wind, the forward motion of the vehicle, it forces Charlie's consciousness entirely into the now. He is experiencing a flow state.
he's not thinking about Aunt Helen, and he's not worrying about school tomorrow. He's just there.
Exactly. And the third component is the dissolution of the ego, creating the illusion of youthful invincibility. In that enclosed space, moving forward at high speed, the rigid boundaries of the self begin to blur.
He merges with everything.
For that 3-minute pop song, he is no longer Charlie the traumatized outcast. He merges with his environment. He becomes part of the music, part of the vibration of the truck, part of Sam and Patrick. He feels boundless. He feels infinite because, for a moment, he is not confined by the prison of his own traumatized mind.
Wow. That actually gave me chills. It is such a beautiful, triumphant image.
Yeah.
But the tragic reality of feeling infinite in a tunnel is that tunnels end. You eventually have to drive out into the harsh daylight. And when Charlie tries to take that feeling of invincibility and actually apply it, when he tries to actively participate in normal teenage social dynamics, things go terribly, terribly wrong.
This illustrates the immense danger of living purely in your head. When you've spent your entire life as an observer safely behind the glass, you don't actually know the rules of engagement when you finally step onto the floor.
Okay, let's unpack this downward spiral because it happens so fast. Charlie gets asked to the Sadie Hawkins dance by a girl named Mary Elizabeth. Now, Mary Elizabeth is part of their broader friend group. She makes a punk fanzine, she is highly opinionated, and she considers herself a Buddhist. And Charlie, reverting to his passive nature, just goes along with it.
He doesn't assert himself at all.
Not one bit. They go to the dance, and suddenly they are dating. But as a reader, it is painfully clear he does not like her romantically. He notes that she talks at him, not with him. She exposes him to her favorite indie records and obscure books, but Charlie astutely realizes that she doesn't actually care if he genuinely likes them.
She just wants an audience.
She wants the credit for being the one to expose him to them. She wants an audience, not a partner.
And Charlie, lacking a strong sense of self, slips right back into the role of the passive sponge. He is participating in the form of a relationship, going on dates, holding hands, but not the substance. He isn't making choices. He's just letting Mary Elizabeth happen to him. He avoids conflict at the cost of his own authenticity.
And that lack of authenticity builds until it detonates. It happens on a night when the whole friend group is hanging out in a basement, playing a game of truth or dare. The game gets around to Charlie, and he is given a dare. The dare is explicitly to kiss the prettiest girl in the room.
Oh boy, here we go.
Now, context is everything here. Mary Elizabeth, his official girlfriend, is sitting right there in the circle. The absolute unwritten rule of the universe is that you kiss your girlfriend. But Charlie looks around the room, stands up, walks past Mary Elizabeth, and kisses Sam.
The fallout is instantaneous and socially devastating.
It is a social nuclear bomb. He basically detonates his entire support system in 5 seconds. And the most frustrating, tragic part of the scene is that Charlie isn't trying to be cruel. He isn't trying to humiliate Mary Elizabeth maliciously. He literally lacks the social filter required to navigate the nuance of that situation.
This is where we see the absolute consequence of literal honesty, and it brings us back to the idea of neurodivergent traits and the impact of trauma on social development.
How does that connect?
When psychologists talk about neurodivergent traits in this context, they refer to how some brains process information and social cues differently than the neurotypical majority. For someone like Charlie, whose social development has been stunted by profound isolation and trauma, rules are strictly binary. They're black and white.
Ah, I see.
The dare was not kiss your girlfriend. The dare was kiss the prettiest girl. In Charlie's rigid, literal, internal logic, Sam is undeniably the prettiest girl. Therefore, to comply with the rules of the game, he must kiss Sam. He completely, genuinely misses the unwritten social contract that dictates when playing a provocative game in the presence of your romantic partner, you must prioritize and validate your partner's feelings over literal truth.
Wait, I have to stop you there. I totally see the logic, but isn't it also just a teenage boy acting on his crush and making a dumb mistake? I mean, I want to use an analogy here.
Sir, go ahead.
To me, it feels like Charlie is someone trying to drive a car, but only reading the owner's manual. The manual says, press the gas pedal to make the car go forward. So Charlie gets in, sees an empty road, and presses the gas. He is following the literal instructions.
But he's missing the context.
Right. Because he has never actually practiced driving with an instructor, he completely misses the nuanced, unwritten rules of survival on the road. He doesn't know to check his blind spots. He doesn't know how to read the body language of the driver in the next lane. He doesn't know that sometimes you have to yield, even when you technically have the right of way. He knows the stated rule, tell the truth, but he crashes the car into a wall because he lacks social intuition.
That analogy holds up perfectly because the crash in this scenario leaves him completely wrecked. He followed the literal rule, but the emotional collateral damage is immense. Patrick, trying to manage the fallout and protect Mary Elizabeth, tells Charlie he needs to stay away from the group for a while. He essentially excommunicates Charlie.
Which is Charlie's worst nightmare.
And this is where Charlie's fragile psychological architecture begins to rapidly collapse.
Because they were his only anchor.
Precisely. Without his friends to act as a buffer between him and his own mind, his trauma responses amplify. He begins to dissociate severely. He describes taking solitary trips to the local mall, just sitting on a bench and watching people, fathers buying things for their kids, teenagers laughing, retail workers.
Goes back to being the wallflower.
But he is no longer observing them with that deep, soulful empathy Patrick praised him for. He is observing them like a detached, clinical alien. He feels entirely unmoored from the human race.
He gets so dark so fast. He is desperate to escape his own head, so he drops acid, he takes LSD, he ends up wandering around his neighborhood in the dead of winter, hallucinating that the bare trees are turning into dragons.
It's a complete psychological break.
He lies down in the freezing snow to make a snow angel, and he just stays there. The police eventually find him, and he is freezing, his skin pale blue. He survives the physical exposure, but psychologically he talks about falling into a trance. He describes the physical environment warping around him, feeling completely disconnected from his own body. His defense mechanisms have failed completely.
What Charlie is experiencing here are intense episodes of depersonalization and derealization. To define those terms, depersonalization is the terrifying sensation that you are detached from your own body or mind, almost like you are an outside observer of your own life.
And derealization.
Derealization is the sensation that the outside world is unreal, distorted, or dreamlike. The trauma that he has been desperately keeping at bay, buffering it with Bill's books, with mixtapes, with the constant presence of Sam and Patrick, is demanding to be felt. The structural walls of the Wallflower are cracking under the pressure.
And as those walls crack, as his current life falls apart, we are forced to look backward. We have to look at the foundation of Charlie's life, which is his family. Because you don't arrive at a state of profound depersonalization in a vacuum.
Family dynamics play a huge role.
Charlie's family dynamic is incredibly fascinating because, on the surface, they're very normal, very middle class. But underneath, the house is thick with hidden, suffocating grief. Let's talk about the dad.
The father is a quintessential study in generational male stoicism. He is a provider, he works hard, he demands respect from his children, and he absolutely does not show vulnerability. His primary emotional directive to Charlie whenever Charlie is upset is to act like a man.
Right. But there is this one incredible, revealing memory Charlie shares about his dad. It's 1983, and the family is gathered around the television watching the series finale of the show MAH. Now, historically, that was a massive cultural event. It was a highly emotional episode of television.
Everyone was watching it.
Everyone in the room is getting teary-eyed. And right in the middle of a commercial break, the dad abruptly stands up, announces his throat is dry, and says he is going to the kitchen to make a sandwich. Little Charlie, just being curious, follows him into the kitchen.
And what does he find?
He finds his big, stoic dad standing at the counter, making a sandwich and crying harder than anyone else in the entire family. The dad finishes wiping his eyes, looks down, sees Charlie watching him, and says, "This is our little secret, okay, champ?"
Our little secret. It is undeniably a poignant, beautiful moment of connection between a father and a son. But when we look at it through the lens of psychological development, it is incredibly damaging.
Really? How so?
It is revealing about the crushing emotional constraints placed on men of that generation. The father literally feels he has to physically flee the room and hide behind a mundane, masculine task, making a sandwich, just to process a profound, normal, human emotion like sadness. He believes he cannot weep in front of his wife and children without losing his authority.
And what does that teach a highly sensitive kid like Charlie?
By swearing his son to secrecy, the father inadvertently teaches Charlie a terrible lesson. He teaches him that deep, overwhelming emotion is something to be hidden. It teaches him that vulnerability is inherently shameful and must be managed strictly in private. It reinforces the idea that being a man means swallowing your pain.
Which perfectly explains why Charlie internalizes absolutely everything until he literally hallucinates. He thinks he's supposed to handle it alone. And it's not just the dad's stoicism. There's a pervasive shadow of violent, unexpressed grief hanging over Charlie from the very beginning. Early in the narrative, we learn about his middle school friend, Michael.
The friend who passed away.
Michael died by suicide before the school year started. He left no note. He left no explanation. The school counselor just offered a vague guess that it was due to problems at home. And that total lack of closure haunts Charlie's every waking moment. He is constantly wondering what those problems were, agonizing over the details, trying to make sad sense of an incomprehensible act.
Because without a narrative, the human mind spins out of control. We are meaning-making machines. Charlie desperately needs to understand why Michael did it, partly out of grief, but also out of terror.
Terror.
Yes. He needs to understand the mechanics of Michael's despair so he can ensure it doesn't happen to him or to his sister or to anyone else. And because he cannot ask Michael and because his family doesn't talk about hard things, he turns to art. He uses art to express the agonizing pain he cannot speak aloud in his own home.
This manifests at a secret Santa party with his friends before the big fallout. Charlie is asked to read a poem. He doesn't say who wrote it, but it is painfully clear to the reader that it is either a direct reflection of his own inner state or a deep projection of what he imagines Michael went through.
What's the poem about?
The poem is called Absolutely Nothing. It is about a young boy who starts out full of joy. He writes innocent poems on yellow paper with green lines, poems about his dog, about getting gold stars in class. But as he grows up, the world encroaches. The innocence dies, the people around him become cruel, and he feels entirely empty. The final stanza of the poem describes the boy, now older, writing a poem on a brown paper bag. He grades his own poem, gives himself an A, and then puts a slash on each of his wrists.
It is a devastating articulation of a boy watching his own internal light extinguish. When Charlie finishes reading it, the group is stunned into absolute silence. They recognize the sheer gravity of the words. Bob, the guy whose house they were at for the brownie incident, even remarks quietly that it sounds exactly like a suicide note.
It chills the whole room.
And in many ways, it functions as one. Charlie is using this poem as a distress flare. He is shooting it up into the night sky, hoping one of his friends will see the true depth of his agony. He is using literature to communicate what his trauma prevents him from saying directly, I am drowning, I am in danger.
And that danger reaches its absolute critical mass at the climax of our deep dive. We are nearing the end of the narrative. It's the end of the summer. The seniors have graduated and are leaving for college. Sam is packing up her bedroom the night before she leaves for Penn State.
It's an emotionally charged moment.
Charlie is sitting on her bed, helping her pack, desperately trying to memorize every single detail of her face before she vanishes from his daily life. And Sam, perhaps sensing that this is her last chance to reach him, finally confronts him about his passivity.
She challenges his entire methodology for existing. She asks him, point blank, why he never asked her out on a date after she finally broke up with Craig. Charlie gives a very noble, very wallflower answer. He says he just wanted her to be happy and he didn't want to complicate things if her happiness wasn't with him. He thought he was being selfless.
But Sam isn't having it. She sees right through the nobility to the fear underneath. She drops the hammer. She looks at him and says, you can't just sit there and put everybody's lives ahead of yours and think that counts as love. You just can't. You have to do things.
She's pulling him into reality.
She is demanding that he step off the wall. She is demanding that he stop being the designated driver and actually step onto the dance floor. She is telling him that to truly love someone, you have to participate in your own life. You have to risk rejection.
And in that intense moment of vulnerability, of being truly seen and challenged by the person he loves, the physical boundaries between them are crossed. They begin to kiss. The physical intimacy escalates. Sam checks in with him, asks if it hurts, and Charlie says no, it feels good. But then, as the physical closeness deepens, something terrifying happens within Charlie's mind.
The narrative itself seems to physically fracture on the page. Suddenly, Charlie is laying on the couch. Sam is standing over him, looking incredibly worried, putting a damp washcloth on his forehead. And Charlie looks up and says, I can't do that anymore. I'm sorry.
And Sam misunderstands him.
Yes, Sam immediately reassures him, thinking he is just overwhelmed and talking to her about not being ready for sex. But Charlie explicitly notes to the reader, I wasn't talking to Sam anymore. I was talking to someone else.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, this is the moment the dam finally breaks. When a person experiences severe abuse, especially in early childhood, the brain often represses the memory to protect the host's sanity. It buries it deep in the subconscious. But the body remembers.
The body keeps the score.
Exactly. The physical intimacy with Sam, the feeling of a body pressing against his, the vulnerability of the bedroom setting acts as a massive neurological trigger. It bypasses his prefrontal cortex, the logical part of his brain, and goes straight to the amygdala. The physical sensation unlocks the repressed memory that his mind had buried.
And what he remembers changes everything we know about him. He remembers Aunt Helen. Now, throughout the entire text, Charlie has spoken about his Aunt Helen with nothing but total adoration. He has idolized her.
She was his absolute favorite person in the world.
She bought him his favorite books. She lived with their family when she was going through a hard time. And tragically, we learn early on that she died in a terrible car crash on Christmas Eve, which also happened to be Charlie's 7th birthday. She was out buying him a second present when she was killed.
Yeah.
Charlie has carried immense, crushing guilt his whole life, fundamentally believing that his desire for a present caused her death.
But the repressed memory that surfaces on Sam's bed reveals a horrific, paradigm-shifting truth. Aunt Helen, the person he loved and trusted more than anyone else in the world, the person whose memory he had sanctified, had sexually molested him.
It's just unimaginable.
The trauma of the profound sexual abuse was inextricably linked in his 7-year-old brain with the trauma of her sudden, violent death on his birthday. The child's mind simply could not process the overwhelming paradox that Aunt Helen was simultaneously his primary source of love and his primary source of profound violation.
So his brain just broke.
So his psyche fractured. It repressed the memories of the abuse and hyper-romanticized her memory to survive the loss. But the cost of that repression was a life lived in generalized, free-floating anxiety. It left Charlie with a deep-seated, subconscious belief that to be loved is to be completely passive, to let things be done to you without complaint.
Oh my God. When you lay it out like that, it's unbearable. When the full weight of that memory hits him, the psychological overload is absolute. After he leaves Sam's house, he drives home, but he's completely dissociated.
He's gone.
He walks into his house, sits on the couch in the family room, takes all his clothes off, and just stares blankly at a television screen that isn't even turned on. He goes completely catatonic. His parents find him the next morning. His stoic dad resorts to slapping him across the face, desperately trying to snap him out of the trance, but nothing works. Charlie has left the building. He has to be institutionalized in a psychiatric hospital for 2 months.
Catatonia is the mind's ultimate final retreat. The real world, armed with this horrific new truth, became far too dangerous to inhabit. His defense mechanisms were gone, his friends had left for college, and the truth was too horrifying to look at. So his consciousness simply pulled the plug. He shut down. He stopped participating entirely because participation meant acknowledging the abuse.
But the beautiful thing is, he doesn't stay there.
Yeah.
And this is where we pivot into the truly triumphant part of this deep dive. While he's in the hospital over those 2 months, he does the grueling work. He works extensively with a psychiatrist. And during one of their sessions, the psychiatrist tells Charlie a story, a psychological parable, really that entirely shifts Charlie's worldview. It's the tale of 2 brothers.
Yes. The psychiatrist tells Charlie about 2 boys who grew up in the exact same household, raised by a severely alcoholic, highly abusive father. The environment is a nightmare. Years go by, the boys grow up and leave home.
What happens to them?
One brother grows up to be a completely sober, highly successful carpenter. He builds a good life. The other brother grows up to be a severe alcoholic, trapped in a cycle of poverty and abuse, exactly like the father.
Oh, wow.
When a researcher interviews the sober brother and asks him why he doesn't drink, the brother replies, "After seeing what alcohol did to my father, how could I?" But when the researcher interviews the alcoholic brother and asks him why he drinks, the brother gives the exact same rationale. "I learned how to drink sitting on my father's knee. How could I not?"
Wow. Same exact toxic environment, same exact childhood trauma, but 2 completely radically different outcomes.
Exactly. The psychological significance the psychiatrist is imparting here is the eternal battle between determinism and free will. For his entire life, Charlie has been living under the heavy blanket of determinism. He believed that because Aunt Helen abused him, because she died, because his friend killed himself, he was fundamentally messed up.
He thought he was doomed.
He believed he was destined to be a passive victim forever, simply acting out the script his trauma wrote for him. The parable of the 2 brothers shatters that illusion. It teaches him that while we absolutely cannot choose where we come from, and we cannot prevent the trauma inflicted upon us as children, we do have agency in the aftermath. We can choose what we do with the pain. We can choose where we go from there.
And Charlie takes that lesson of agency and applies it in the most profound, difficult way possible. He chooses to forgive Aunt Helen. He realizes that if he spends his life blaming her and letting anger consume him, he has to trace the trauma backward.
It never ends if you do that.
He has to blame her father for hitting her. He has to blame the family friend who molested Aunt Helen when she was a little girl. And he has to blame the person who molested that friend. It is an endless, devastating chain of generational trauma stretching back in time. And Charlie, sitting in that hospital, makes a radical choice. He decides that the cycle stops with him. It stops with acceptance, and it stops with choice.
It is a monumental psychological breakthrough. By choosing forgiveness, which does not mean excusing the behavior, but rather releasing its hold over his future, he reclaims his narrative. He stops being the passive sponge that blindly absorbs the trauma of the past. He becomes the filter. He processes the horror, extracts his own survival, and decides what his future will look like.
Which perfectly, poetically leads us to the final, beautiful image of the source text. It's the end of August. Charlie is out of the hospital. Sam is back in town visiting before college officially starts. She, Patrick, and Charlie reunite. They get in Sam's pickup truck, and they drive toward that same tunnel in Pittsburgh. But this time, the dynamic is entirely different.
Walk us through the contrast. How has Charlie changed?
Think back to the first tunnel drive. In that first scene, Charlie sat squarely in the middle of the seat between them. He was sandwiched in safety. He just watched them, letting the music and the moment wash over him. He was a passenger in his own transcendent moment. But this time, as they approach the tunnel, Charlie climbs out of the cab and gets into the back of the pickup truck.
He steps outside.
As they enter the darkness of the tunnel, he stands up. He doesn't hold his arms out like he's flying, pretending to be a superhero. He just stands there, firmly planted on his own 2 feet, letting the immense force of the wind rush over his face. He is crying, but he is smiling. Because this time, he isn't just watching Sam and Patrick feel infinite. He is the one feeling the wind. He is standing alone, unprotected, feeling the full force of the world. He is finally truly participating.
He has officially stepped off the wall. He is no longer the wallflower.
So as we wrap up, what does this all mean for you, listening right now? We have journeyed with Charlie from a boy paralyzed by unacknowledged trauma, watching life from the absolute safety of the sidelines, to a young man standing up at the back of a truck, moving at 60 miles an hour, actively participating in his own existence, and finally recognizing his own intrinsic self-worth.
It's quite the journey.
It forces you to turn the lens inward and look at your own life. How often do you choose the safety of the wall over the risk of the dance floor? How often do you let life just happen to you, absorbing whatever comes your way like a sponge, rather than actively filtering and engaging with it?
And that leaves us with a final provocative thought for you to carry into your week. Toward the end of his letters, Charlie realizes a profound truth about suffering. He notes that even if other people have it objectively worse, even if there are kids starving in other countries, or people enduring unimaginable horrors, it doesn't change the fact that you have what you have. It doesn't invalidate your own pain.
Your pain is your pain.
Exactly. But equally, and more importantly, your past doesn't invalidate your capacity for future joy. So I ask you to reflect on this. What is the Aunt Helen in your own life? What is the narrative, the relationship, or the memory that you have romanticized or buried or lied to yourself about just to avoid looking at a painful truth? And what would happen if you finally allowed yourself to see it clearly, to forgive it, and to step into your own tunnel, ready to feel the wind?
I absolutely love that. A massive thank you for joining us on this incredible journey. Remember to subscribe to URSummary right here on YouTube for more deep dives just like this one. Go out there today, take a deep breath, step off the wall, and truly participate in your day. Don't let the muddy waters of your past keep you from seeing the infinite possibilities of your present. See you next time.